Good afternoon. My name is Megan Skufka, and today I will be talking to you about reinforcement, implications, and effects of. Before I dive into the research articles that I found, I would like to unpack what reinforcement truly is. So reinforcement can be defined as anything that increases the probability or likelihood that a response will occur. Reinforcement is just not unique to applied behavior analysis or behaviorism. Reinforcement is strewn in our lives every day. For example, brushing my teeth. Not getting cavities reinforces me to brush my teeth every morning and evening. Also, not having bad breath reinforces me brushing my teeth because people will talk to me. So reinforcement is just not unique to actions either, per se. It's also praise, verbal. So if you look in the right-hand corner there, that young man, that's B.F. Skinner, and he is one of the forefathers of behaviorism, and he really brought a lot of light to reinforcement and the power of through his research with operant conditioning. So there are 4 types of reinforcement. The first one being, in no specific order, is positive reinforcement. And this is simply, well, not always simply done, but defined. It's adding something in order to increase a response. So a way I think about positive reinforcement and a way that I understand it is like this. You work really hard at work and your boss notices. And because of your hard work, you get a raise. So the behavior of your hard work is being reinforced by a raise, which is adding something, and it's reinforcing that behavior. They say that psychologically, this is the most powerful out of the 4 types of reinforcement, but I think that's debatable. So keeping with the theme of adding, we move to punishment. So punishment is adding a reprimanding consequence in order to decrease the response or behavior. So a way that I think about this and understand it is through our judicial system. So if I get caught robbing a bank, I go to trial, they prove me guilty, my punishment is going to be jail time. So robbing bank equals punishment. They're adding something to condition me not to rob banks anymore. I hope that doesn't sound disjointed. So negative reinforcement. I think about this in a mathematical sense. So when I see the word negative, I think subtraction sign, that means to take away. So negative reinforcement is taking away something in order to increase a response or a desired behavior. So a way that I understand this is you want students to complete their homework all week. That's your desired behavior. So if they complete their homework all week, they will not have to take the quiz on Friday. So completed homework equals removal of quiz. You're taking away something to condition that behavior of completing their homework. So extinction. Extinction is removing a condition or a consequence in hopes to decrease the subject's response or behavior. You're taking away something so that a response is decreased. That's why I put extinction after negative reinforcement, because it's that same idea that you're taking away, you're withholding to produce, elicit, condition the behavior that you want or response. Okay, before we get our hands dirty with the article research and unpacking of, there's some vocabulary that I want to just make you guys awake to or remind you, so we have like a strong understanding of what these articles are really saying to us. So if you look at the first bullet point, it says signal detection tasks. Okay, so what I want you guys to do is this. Right hand is red. Left hand is green. Now look at that image with those elongated rectangles. Which is there more of, red or green? Raise your corresponding hand. Remember, right is red, left is green. Good. Hopefully all of you guys have raised your left hand. So that's what they mean by signal detection tasks. Okay, the next one, discriminability. This is the quality of being able to be identified, distinguished. Yes, okay. So then we have NCR, which is non-contingent reinforcement, and reinforced properties are presented on a fixed time, typically before a demand. I'll talk more about that later, don't you worry. Okay, so this is the first article that I will be discussing with you. This is my basic research article, and it is from the Journal of the Experimental Analysis of Behavior. And the title reads, Effects of Point Loss Punishers on Human Signal Detection Performance. I know that sounds really overwhelming and slightly intimidating, but we're going to make sense of it together, don't worry. So the authors, Cecilia Lai and Brent Alsop, wrote a really beautiful and concrete opening that really helped me to understand what they were really trying to do with their research. So I would like to read that to you guys. So many situations require organisms to discriminate between stimuli that signal different consequences. For example, a bee must decide whether a plant's pollen is toxic or safe, or a pedestrian must decide whether or not it is safe to cross the road. In these examples, both the positive consequences arising from correct choices and the negative consequences arising from errors affect the choices that we make. So moving into the introduction of the whole research element behind this. This article presents and discusses a discrete trial procedure in which participants are asked to participate in discrimination tasks where they receive point gain reinforcers for correct answers and point loss punishers for incorrect answers. The frequencies of the reinforcers and punishers vary from experiment to experiment. So let's look at the subject. So the subjects in this experiment are in Group A. There are 5 females and there's 1 male, and their average age is 18.3. Out of the 6 human beings, they range in age from 18 to 19. In Group B, there's 6 people, and 3 of them are males and 3 of which are females. Their average age is 19 years. Okay, so the experiment is ran on computers, and it uses a program called Microsoft Visual Basic. And if you look over to the right-hand part of your screen, you'll notice that little image that I included. So that is what the test subject's actual screen looks like when they're taking the test. And I'll go into detail of what they're asked to do, but just to give you a visual in your brain. So you'll look down and you'll notice that there's 2 icons. So one of the icons says blue and one of the icons says yellow. And you guys are intelligent enough, you can use your deductive reasoning and associate that the blue icon must match up with the darker shaded greebly. Yes, those creatures are called greeblies. I'm not too sure why. And then if you look at the white greeblies, they are meant to be yellow. I apologize for the lack of color. So the subject, there's no verbal response. It's just simply a click of a mouse, which is so 2014. Okay, so moving on to procedures. I kind of gave you guys a little bit of a teaser of what the subjects are expected to do, but I'm going to go into more depth now. So as mentioned before in the subject slide, there are 12 human beings and they're divided into two groups. So we have group A and we have group B. Group A and B are asked to do the same task. They have the same expectation in that sense, but there's a slight variation, and that variation comes at screen 4. I'm moving ahead. So let me read you concretely what the subjects are expected to do. So I'm going to start underneath Group A, Screen 2. So if there are more blue greeblies, press the blue button. An example array showing more blue greeblies was presented. Screen 3. If there are more yellow greeblies, press the yellow button. An example array showing more yellow greeblies was presented. Okay, so here comes the good stuff. This is where it gets really cool, and this is where reinforcement comes into play. Screen 4. Sometimes when you are correct, you will gain a point. Sometimes nothing happens. You might be correct or wrong. When you get 70 points, the session will end and you can go. What kind of reinforcement is that? If you're gaining a point. Yes, you are absolutely correct. It is positive reinforcement. Okay, so positive reinforcement, when you get to 70, you're done with the task. All right. Concerning screen 5 and screen 6, that's just saying there'll be like a little thermometer on the side of your screen to measure where you're at point-wise. It's not, I don't think it's that pertinent to understand the essential idea of this research. So then if you look at Group B, this is where it differs. So I want you to keep in mind Group A, positive reinforcement. That's it. They're gaining points. Okay, Group B, Screen 4. Sometimes when you are correct, you will gain a point. Sometimes nothing happens. You might be correct or wrong. Sometimes when you are wrong, you will lose a point. When you get 60 points, the session will end and you can go. Okay, so there is that element of positive reinforcement because sometimes when you're right, you will gain a point. But what the difference is between Group B and Group A is that Group B is notified sometimes when they are incorrect and they lose a point. So that's negative reinforcement. So that's the difference between Group A and Group B. Group A, only positive reinforcement. Group B has a combination of both. It has a punisher, the punisher thus being taking away the point. Okay. Okay, now this is the good stuff. This is what we do all of that heavy lifting and heavy reading for. The results. So I found this to be probably one of the greatest aha moments of my life when I was able to figure out what they were trying to say here. So I'm going to walk you through my thinking, like do a think aloud of how I got to these results and like what that means. So you'll notice that on the right hand side I placed in an image of the line graphs. So contained within the black circle is Group A, and then there's a second black circle, or oval rather, and that's Group B. So I want you, when you look at this, you're just strictly, for each group, you're going to be looking straight down. Then in the red, those are the results for discriminability on the top. And then the bottom is the response, like the reinforcers that were given correlating with the accuracy of the greeblies, the colors. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the solid line, which is the mean. All of those other lines, those are just the participants, the subjects, and their individual scores. But we want to look at the average of what using positive and negative reinforcers can produce and what just positive reinforcers produce. So looking at Group A, overall, as a cohort, the number of reinforcers went up while the accuracy of detection went down. So you'll notice that when I made sense of this line graph, I looked at the bottom first for the reinforcer. So I just made note of how the mean line is traveling. So I notice it starts off strong and it stays pretty consistent, and then there is an increase, and there's another increase. So then I'm going to keep that in my mind and look up at their accuracy, this discriminability for Group A. And I notice, okay, so the mean line starts off pretty much like the same consistency as the response line, the reinforcer line. And then there's an increase, and I notice that the reinforcer, there's an increase as well. But then something happens. The reinforcers are still increasing, but there's a decrease in accuracy. So positive reinforcement is not proving to be as fruitful as it was in the previous Greebly trials. I wonder why that is. Okay, just keeping that in mind, let's look over at Group B. So overall, Group B has, as the accuracy increased in the detection task, the number of punishers went down. And they used positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement for this, for Group B's experiment. So again, I'm going to look down at the punisher line. I'm looking at the solid line, which is the mean line, the average of all the subjects. And I'm noticing it starts out pretty high, and then it decreases, and then there's a slight increase. Okay, so then I'm going to look up at the accuracy. And I noticed that in the beginning, as the negative reinforcers, the punishment, the loss of point goes down, the accuracy goes up. And then there's a spike. While the negative reinforcers are slightly increasing, there is a huge gain in the accuracy in Group B. And just thinking this out loud, I just came to something. I wonder if it's because they're not always notified if they are correct or incorrect. Okay, so the more powerful results to me, in my mind, is Group B, and I feel like that is because you're doing less by giving them less punishment, but their scores are increasing. And I'm wondering if that is because of more feedback. And I wonder if the subjects were given even more feedback, if the scores would be, or the data would be even more impressive. But Group B proved to have better discriminability than Group 1. I believe that this is due to the combination of reinforcers that the researchers implemented for this experiment. So that's kind of cool to keep in mind because we always think positive reinforcement is the way to go. As I mentioned earlier in one of the introduction slides, they say it's the most powerful, but I feel like maybe it's not as powerful unless it's used in conjunction with a punisher to value that positive reinforcement even more. So now we're going to be moving on to the applied article, which is from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. And this article is entitled Some Effects on Non-Contingent Positive Reinforcement on Multiply Controlled Problem Behavior and Compliance in a Demand Context. I actually think it's supposed to be multiple, not multiply, but they're published and I'm not. Okay, so let's just talk about the title for a second to make sense of it. So that non-contingent positive reinforcement. So that, thinking back to the vocabulary slide that I showed you guys, so that is giving a positive reinforcer, but in a demand context, but it doesn't have to be reliant on a behavior. It can be done before a behavior to elicit a response or a behavior that you want. This is also known as NCR. So, introduction. Non-contingent delivery of a primary reinforcer is sufficient to increase compliance and reduce the rate of problem behavior. And that also mentions that in our applied behavior analysis book, Cooper, Huron, and Heward. Okay, so moving forward, let's talk about the subjects. The subject in this, the participant. So if you notice that beautiful little girl, that is Manuela. It's not actually her. I just wanted to give you guys a visual. So a little bit of background about Manuela. She's 8 years old. She's a female, obviously. She is identified as having autism, cerebral palsy. She also has obsessive compulsive disorder, very limited verbal skills, and she has problematic behavior. And those problematic behaviors are categorized as like aggression and self-interest behavior. So the setting of this applied research is in an inpatient facility in her bedroom. And I'm assuming it looks like this. Again, this is not actually from the study. I just wanted to give you guys a visual. Okay, so the data collection. Data was collected by observers who were in the same room as Manuela and the therapist. Manuela and the therapist were sitting on a mat on the floor, and the observers were standing up in the background. It didn't state how many observers there were, but they were measuring Manuela's compliance concerning the baseline and intervention, rate of therapists' vocal instructions, and the delivery of the edible reinforcer by the therapist. Remember, we're using NCR in this applied research article. Okay, so the design of this NCR experiment, they used functional analysis, and I just said it. They also used non-contingent reinforcement, but they did not use the NCR in the baseline. So they were trying to measure if NCR would lower the problematic behavior and increase her compliance. As compared to just the demand context with the toy and play baseline and the baseline where the therapist would ask Manuela to do something and Manuela would only receive an edible if she completed the task. And this caused a lot of frustration for Manuela. So this is where NCR comes into play. So the procedures. NCR is identical to demand condition within this experiment for the baseline that they used, with the exception of the deliverable. So the deliverable was edible. So Manuela had the choice between cheese crackers and graham crackers. And the therapist would deliver which one Manuela chose before giving vocal instructions. It didn't go into detail about this in the article, but I'm assuming that the therapist presented, Manuela pointed, gave it, gave Manuela the edible. When Manuela ate the edible after it was consumed, then the therapist would have a demand for her. The therapist would pause 10 seconds before beginning each new session. So just to clarify and make sense of this for you guys, in case you're lost, because I kind of feel like I'm talking in circles. So, all right. They are testing to see if using NCR, a non-contingent reinforcer, will increase Manuela's compliance in completing tasks and decrease her problematic behaviors. Because before in simply the demand context of therapists asking her to do something and then receiving the primary reinforcer, the positive reinforcer, would she receive the edible. And that proved to be very frustrating for Manuela, and that's when she would demonstrate the self-injurious behaviors. Okay, so hope that brought clarity. Okay, so the results. So I showed you guys the baseline before. We know that she had a lot of problematic behavior in just simply the demand context without the NCR. So just looking at the non-contingent reinforcer, I circled that with a red marker. So if you look at that non-contingent reinforcer, you definitely see a dramatic decrease in the problematic behavior as compared to the baseline without the NCR. And compliance went up immensely. That's huge. That's so exciting. So problem behavior was elevated in the baseline demand condition, but remained zero in the toy play condition. With the onset of NCR, behavior decreased and compliance increased. Woohoo! Science works. This suggests that the non-contingent delivery of preferred food may be a useful tool when trying to reduce problem behavior in a demand context. And I totally agree, and the data is here to prove it. I feel like one of the reasons why the data was so shocking in a fabulous way is due in part because of the NCR, but I wonder if NCR was so successful because it signaled to Manuela that there was an availability of an edible, a snack, and a snack of her choice. There was no ambiguity if she was going to be rewarded or not. It was something concrete and right in front of her. So I feel like there was a stronger rate of compliance, which decreases those problematic behaviors. This also suggests that a high density of positive reinforcement is a crucial component of successful behavior interventions, especially for individuals with autism. One thing that the article did not mention that I was curious about is satiation. I wonder what the data would have been if they reached that point. And I know that they only did time session of 4 minutes, so satiation might have been hard to reach. But I also wonder what time of day this was, if this was before a meal or after a meal, and if that affects Manuela's compliance and which time of day would be better to train her to do tasks or to respond to verbal prompts. I feel like this is important information that behavior therapists should know when implementing these into our own practice. Moving forward, more research should be conducted to evaluate the social acceptability of NCR because I feel like might sound terrible, but I know humans, essentially, if you break it down, we are animals, but I wonder if it's dangerous to train humans, and I know that word's dangerous to use, like dogs. Like my dog, if I give my dog a treat, I know that my dog is more likely to do what I ask them next, like sit or shake hands, because they know that the treat is there. I think it's a fine line at times. Okay, so conclusion from this amazing research project. This is what I found, and it deeply meaningful for me and my practice concerning behaviorism. I never really understood the value or the effectiveness of positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, and specifically using them in conjunction with one another, using punishers in conjunction with positive reinforcement, like increasing the feedback, I feel increases the desired outcome. These studies further validated the importance of using reinforcement when conditioning implementing behavioral performance interventions. Punishers have a negative reputation. They do. I was always so afraid to use them or think about them. But now, after reading the first study with the Greeblies, the point loss, I understand how the Punisher works. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. Um, I feel that it's important for a behavior analyst to be versed in both the basic and applied research because it gives you a rooted and informed understanding of how these practices work for other people. And to put them to use in your own practice and to understand the implications and results that might arise, I feel like is very important. And I feel like knowing these implications and effects help to make your practice more succinct and more efficient and more meaningful for the subject and for yourself. So the discussion question that I want to pose to you guys to get your feedback and like your understanding of what reinforcement, the power of it, this is my question. What are the most important guidelines for increasing the effectiveness of reinforcement intervention? You guys, thank you so much for your time and bearing with me. You're amazing. Love you.